I've recently been asked this question: can the Mediterranean diet be gluten-free? In this video, you'll learn whether or not we can adapt the Mediterranean diet to make it gluten-free while still maintaining the nutritional quality. Hey there, I'm Dr. Anna. I'm a medical doctor who was trained in Italy. And on this channel, you're gonna learn how to master your health with the Mediterranean diet. So when deciding whether or not the Mediterranean diet can be gluten-free, here's what we're dealing with. This diet is famous for its inclusion of whole grains, including wheat and wheat varieties, barley, rye, pasta, couscous, and other ancient grains. But if you can't eat all of these grains because they have gluten in them, maybe it's because you have celiac disease, a gluten allergy, or an intolerance or a sensitivity, then you might assume that the Mediterranean diet is not going to work for you. Well, this is false. I'd argue that you can absolutely adapt this diet to meet your gluten-free needs. And I'll break down how to do that right now. So it's important that we first answer the question: what is gluten and why is it so problematic? Gluten is a protein that's found in a lot of grains naturally, and this includes grains like wheat, barley, and rye. And the properties of gluten add a sort of stretchiness to a lot of these grains. So think of this in terms of pizza dough. Pizza dough, which is made often from flour that comes from wheat, is very stretchy and malleable. Picture a pizza chef tossing that dough in the air to make it a large round circle. If that dough did not have gluten in it, it wouldn't stretch so easily and likely would just rip apart. So gluten can be thought of as very helpful in its culinary aspect. But in some cases, people have a huge difficulty with consuming this substance. Someone may experience mild symptoms like fatigue, gas or bloating, an alternating constipation or diarrhea, or even brain fog. But in other cases, those symptoms could be more severe, like accidental weight loss, malnutrition, or even intestinal damage. Now, the causes of these symptoms can vary depending on what the actual issue is underlying. In the case of celiac disease, someone is going to experience an autoimmune reaction to gluten. So every time they eat gluten, their own immune cells start attacking it as a threat. In other cases, like an allergy response, they're going to get an allergic type of reaction, which can range in its symptom picture from having lung issues, skin issues, or digestive issues. And then in other cases, it's not really clear, but some people just feel worse when they eat gluten. So given that gluten is not an essential nutrient for our body, it's not a vitamin or a mineral, it definitely can be eliminated from a diet so that someone can avoid the negative symptoms they feel. However, it should be noted that gluten has gotten a lot of bad press in the last years, and some of this might be causing more confusion than is necessary. Here's my take on it. If you're concerned about gluten, I suggest that you talk to your doctor or a dietitian about your concerns. It's possible that avoiding gluten and gluten products will help you feel better and resolve your symptoms, but it's possible that it's not the gluten that's causing the symptoms you feel. What is unfortunate is when people start to avoid gluten because it's sort of trendy or they feel like it's going to give them some sort of health benefit. But in turn, they're reducing their overall intake of grains, especially whole grains, which are otherwise healthy foods that provide us some of the best sources of fiber in our diet overall. That being said, if you know that gluten is a problem for you and you must follow a gluten-free diet, then let's dive into how you can do this according to the Mediterranean diet approach to eating. But first, please subscribe and join our healthy community, and that's going to help us get these videos out to more people who really deserve to learn this information. All right, let's start by first clarifying a really important point. The Mediterranean diet and the Mediterranean approach to eating is not a black and white restrictive style of eating. In general, there are no rules to restrict entirely any specific food. Instead, the emphasis is on increasing certain foods that are known to give us a lot of health benefit, like foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals, fiber, healthy fats, and protein, and instead decreasing the foods that are not giving us as much benefit. And these can be animal foods or animal products, processed foods, and foods with lots of added sugars and chemicals. So for the purpose of this video and the argument we're making here, we're going to focus in on the carbohydrate foods, since that is where the gluten comes from. Now, thanks to Mother Nature, we have a ton of alternative grains, pseudogreens, and seeds that can be eaten instead of the gluten-containing grains. Almost in some cases like a total substitution for the typical dishes that people are going to enjoy in the Mediterranean diet. Now, my approach to dietary recommendations, whether gluten-free or not, is always to emphasize whole foods. This way, incorporating foods that are really healthful for your body and providing a lot of the essential nutrition are going to be the best things you can eat overall. So I'd argue that the best way to approach a gluten-free Mediterranean diet is to emphasize foods that are naturally gluten-free, rather than reaching for gluten-free products, which are often going to be very processed with added sugars, salts, or other chemicals to maintain their shelf stabilization. And that's really Mediterranean diet wellness 101. So next, let's address the foods you need to avoid if you're avoiding gluten. And finally, I'll break down for you a list of gluten-free foods that you should enjoy abundantly when following this approach. Okay, so what do you need to avoid if you're avoiding gluten? Well, the main player is wheat and wheat varieties, and there are a lot of these. Think about things like durum, einkorn, emmer, semolina, spelt, gram, you name it. There are a ton of wheat varieties and different types of ancient wheat grains. And speaking of ancient wheat grains, farro is a typical one that is enjoyed in Italy, which is a pearled grain that has a very nutty, chewy texture, but it does contain gluten. Then we have barley, rye, triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye, and finally oats. But I need to point out that oats in and of themselves are not gluten-containing grains. It just so happens that often in the manufacturing, oats get contaminated with gluten because other gluten-containing foods are processed on the same machinery. So it's important to be on the lookout that if you're completely gluten-free, you have to check the packaging for things like oats. Now, let's talk about the foods to include when following a gluten-free diet. And here I want to emphasize a very important point, and that is to expand our understanding and our thinking about grains to also include pseudograins and seeds. The truth is, carbohydrates in our diet do not have to only come from classical grains. And in general, the more variety that we have in our diet, likely the better off we usually are. And this is because it helps boost our overall nutrient intake and keeps us from getting bored. All right, here's my list of gluten-free grains, pseudograins, and seeds that can be enjoyed abundantly on the Mediterranean diet. We have amaranth, arrowroot, buckwheat, which, note, this is a misnomer. It's actually not a type of wheat. It just has wheat in its name. Corn, which of course can come in many varieties, like cornmeal, grits, polenta are often the ways it's enjoyed. Then we have flaxseed, lots of gluten-free flours, which can be flours from rice, soy, corn, potato, or even bean flours. Then we have millet, which is a seed, quinoa, a pseudograin that also contains a good bit of protein. We have rice and every kind of rice variety, sorghum, soy, tapioca that comes from cassava root, and teff. So as you can see, if you want to follow a gluten-free diet, there is no shortage of choices and variety that can be enjoyed abundantly on the Mediterranean diet. Now, all you need to do is cook your gluten-free grains, pseudograins, or seeds and pair them with healthy fats and proteins to achieve what I argue is the most balanced meal. And that is one that contains the healthy trifecta. I talk about this in many of my videos, but eating healthy fats, fiber, and protein all together is really going to help slow down the digestion, which we know is better for our blood sugar and overall nutrient extraction. Plus, it's going to make you feel a lot better when you're eating. And this is not only important while you're eating, but important for the many hours after a meal where you want to maintain your energy levels. And for maximal success, you're going to want to make sure you know how to approach your meal planning and to make that meal planning as easy as possible. You don't want to miss it in this video over here. I'll see you in there.